You're in a Roman theater, a place for entertainment. The concept came out of the Greek world when they had a fairly high standard of theater, mime, and other dramatic performances in the theater like this. Moved on into the Roman world where they dumbed it down a bit. Here in Caesarea, a city that at the time of this construction, we haven't gone to the background completely, but at the time of this construction was primarily, or to a great extent, a Roman garrison city. A lot of Roman soldiers here. Not? A little louder, right. Let me get up a bit. You don't come to sit here to look at the sea, all right? When this thing was constructed, as it was constructed, the western side was completely closed off with a basically two-story building, and as high as the seats around you. And you'll see an artist's impression of that on our way through when we walk through in a little while. But I want to just focus a few minutes here on what I just mentioned on our bus a few minutes ago, and I think there was one or two heads that nodded when I asked the question, do you know that if it wasn't for Caesarea, if you're a Gentile, you probably wouldn't be here? Right? Remember we spoke up in the north, some of us, we were talking about the way that Yeshua, that Jesus kind of made a bit of an effort to focus on his own people. Right? He was really here for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and all of his work is amongst the Jewish people. He's dealing with them most of the time. He has a couple of instances where he's with Gentiles, but basically it's a Jewish thing. He's a Jew. He's a rabbinical figure to the Jewish people. He's got Jewish disciples, and those Jewish disciples will eventually become the group that the Holy Spirit falls on at Pentecost up in Jerusalem in an all-Jewish event, pretty well. And that event we'll discuss when we're up in Jerusalem, how it happens and how it impacts thousands and thousands of Jews from around the diaspora who are in the city for the feast. But it was very much a Jewish event. And the disciples were good Jews. And they were obeying the law. They were not going and mixing with the Gentiles, because their understanding was that the Messiah was going to be for the Jewish people. He was going to deliver Israel from the Romans, from the Goyim, from the Gentiles. And indeed, that's how it plays out at the beginning. Peter the Apostle, later, after the Holy Spirit has fallen, will make his way down to Jaffa. And we'll be down there. It'll take us about an hour to drive there from here now today. It's a couple of days drive, donkey ride down if you like. He's down there on the roof of the house of Simon the tanner when he has this vision. He has this vision of the sheet coming down from heaven and all the different animals, and the voice from heaven saying, "Arise, Peter, kill and eat." And he draws back and says, "I've never touched an unclean thing." And the voice responds, "What God has cleansed, what God has prepared, don't call unclean." It happens 3 times and the sheet goes up into heaven. How many of you know that God wasn't telling Peter it was okay to eat pork? Right? That was nothing to do with food. It had to do with the fact that outside the door, right at that moment, there were representatives from a centurion. An officer, a commanding officer, over 100 soldiers from the Italian regiment. His name was Cornelius, and he was here in Caesarea. And in Caesarea, he gave alms to the poor, and he had a real fear of God. But he was a bit lost. He wasn't sure which direction to go in. So he sent his emissaries down to Joppa to fetch Peter, and Peter comes back. And you know the story. Peter will go and speak to Cornelius and his household. And wonder of wonders, the same thing that happened in Jerusalem will happen here. The Holy Spirit will fall on these uncircumcised Gentiles. And they'll speak in tongues, and they'll manifest all the same evidences of the Holy Spirit empowering them that the Jews experienced up in Jerusalem. And Peter knows, amazing, God has opened the door to the Gentiles. He's going to get into trouble. When he gets back to Jerusalem, they'll haul him on the carpet because he went into the home of Gentiles, which he shouldn't have done. But when he recounts the vision and the response and the falling of the Holy Spirit here at Caesarea, the disciples all marvel, because as I just said, they realize that God has also opened a way for Gentiles. And because of that, because God did that, you're here. Thank you. Somebody's excited. All right, so we're here for that. So we have a legacy here. Now, the city itself comes out of the mind of Herod the Great. He's going to design this city from scratch. He's going to take a small little Phoenician fishing port called Stratos Tower, and he's going to build here an artificial deep water port. Okay, I'm changing gears radically here. Let's move away from the Christian story for now. Let's go to the heart of this place. Why does it stand here? Herod the Great is not a Jew, but he's the king of the Jews. He's got God-fearing Jews up in Jerusalem, and he builds them a temple to the God of Israel. He's got Hellenized Jews and others down here in the coastal plain that he wants to also cater for as part of his constituency, and he'll build for them here a beautiful city and a temple to another god. All right, over here he will build a city with a port that can facilitate the import and export of goods from the plain of Sharon, which is spread out here behind us, the breadbasket of his day. And to build the port, he will use what is known as he will use ash from a volcano in Italy, which he will mix with water, turn to stone, and create huge, big stones, which he'll settle on the bottom of the seabed floor here. And he'll build this large port, which can facilitate as I say, the import and export of produce into the country. He will gain taxes here from. It's an economic generator for his kingdom, as Herod the Great establishes himself. And he's in love with Rome, and everything that he touches has some kind of Roman connection. But this is pretty much a Roman city, with all the facilities of the theater here, which is, as I said, is for drama, for dramatic presentation, an amphitheater, which later becomes a hippodrome over on the other side to the north of us. We'll see that in a little while. That's a place for chariot races and for blood sports, to entertain the soldiers there. And a beautiful palace stretching out into the sea, where Herod will enjoy his time with his guests, but after he passes away and Rome realizes that his 3 sons can't really control things in the country, they'll establish a system of Roman governors, the most famous of whom is Pontius Pilate. And Pilate will hang out here. He doesn't hang out in Jerusalem when he's in town, when he's in the country. He's going to stay down here in Caesarea. And evidence of his presence here you will see today with your own eyes in what is known as the Pontius Pilate inscription, which we're going to walk past in a little while. Questions? Comments? Anything you want to add, fellow guides?
Maybe just one little thing about the structure itself. Have you been to Greece? Anyone have been to Greece before? Have you seen a Greek theater?
Yeah.
It's always on the side of the hill. A Roman theater is built wherever they want. They don't need a hill for this. They will use their technology, their power to do it. When they will build a road, they will just draw a straight line. It doesn't matter what the terrain is. They don't really care. They build. Why? Because they can. This is the Roman mindset. And just one thing about it, when they will come here, the collision between the cultures will start from the first minute, because we're speaking different languages, even if we're saying the same words. And a simple example for this, when the Roman general is going into Jerusalem, he wants to go to the temple, and the people show him around the temple, the area where the Gentiles can come as near the temple as they can. But it's not enough for him. He goes into the temple, and they try to stop him. Don't go into the temple. He goes into the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest can come once a year for an hour. And he opens the curtain. What does he see?
Nothing.
He sees nothing. And I don't know what he's saying, but I'm imagining that he says Holy Banana. He says, oh my God, these people are crazy. They worship nothing, because the Roman need physical evidence for everything. Okay, they need the stone, they need the technology, and they're great at this. We've seen it, we can see it here. And when at the end of it, when they will destroy the temple, look at their mindset. Okay, we will throw the stones, kaput. That's it. We have terminated this culture, because this is how we Roman understand the world, physically. And it's presented here by saying, okay, we can build the most amazing building in the world wherever we want. By the way, they used to go to the temple in Rome, sacrifice whatever they sacrifice, and ask God for forgiveness for rebelling against Him, because they stood against the force of nature, but still they did it. And that's kind of just going into the mindset of the Romans versus the Jewish community. Going to the Roman bathhouse, okay? Probably the most wonderful thing to do in the Roman world. You go into a bathhouse. It's okay, you can do it, but for the Jewish community to feel pure, you go to the little cold mikveh, okay? And this is only when you feel clean with inside, not outside. Outside you go to the Roman one. And so I was just talking about the different cultural aspects.
And that cultural aspect, which will clash here so violently, will actually cause or erupt in the Great Jewish Revolt. that will end with the destruction, basically with the destruction of Jerusalem, of the temple in Jerusalem. It's this clash of cultures right here, when the Jews are outraged because their temple is desecrated, that you have the explosion that leads to the Great Jewish Revolt of AD 66 through 70.
Before we move on,
Yes.
just a couple more words. You're in a 2,000-year-old theater, guys. This place have seen tremendous amount of the population. This was the hanging out place. People would come with their extended families and sit here a day long. They've seen Greek tragedies, Roman comedies, they would have musical performances, they would have water performances, they could flood up this front area for that. Big families. The size of a theater is quite often reflected on the size of the city, and this shows that this was a pretty prominent city over here. Now what we are sitting in, you can see it's all new, you can see lines, you can see row numbers and seats numbers. Over the centuries, most of the original seats and stones were stolen, taken and used again for other structures as the place changed its characteristics and different occupying forces and occupying civilization came and rebuilt it and made it their own town. Only the very first level in this side, you can see some of the original. Why do we have it so populated now? Because in Israel today, Caesarea is one of the leading musical arenas. If you made it in the Israeli music scene, you would come and have your concert in Caesarea, and therefore they are preparing now for a concert. You can see they have all the, they do not use the natural acoustics of the ancient days, but now using amplifications and everything. You can imagine all those groups are here. If the local governor wants to make a decree, instead of putting posters on the walls or printing it in the press, which was probably not around back in those days, you would have a performer coming up, maybe opera, would come and sing out to them. Today we're going to raise up taxes 15%. It was so well done, so everybody is cheering, and then oops, we shouldn't have cheered for that one. In any case, we are sitting in that arena, and we are going to walk from here and see some architecture elements and give you some speeches here and there along the way, and then at 11:45 exactly we're meeting out by this white tent where we gathered at the beginning. At this time we will separate to the separate buses and follow your own guides, and we continue away. The wheels can go around, we'll be meeting, we'll be walking out in that direction. So
When you come down, please come down the steps. Don't walk down the seats, guys, okay? Come to the stairs and